Welcome to the Cult is King podcast. This is your host, The Duke, with my co-host and sidekick, Rambling Bones.
Hello again, and I think you're my sidekick.
That doesn't seem quite right.
It is. Continue.
Anyway, today it was my choice to pick, and I chose 1957's Black Scorpion. Did you like this one?
Yes, I've been a fan of Black Scorpion for a while. It's maybe not quite how I remembered, but still a solid movie.
Well, and I have to say, I feel like this is one of the better creature features, but I feel like for some reason it's kind of slipped under the radar.
Yeah.
In fact, the only reason I know that this movie exists is as I've mentioned before in a previous episode, I'm a longtime subscriber to the magazine G-Fan, which is a magazine based out of, I believe, Canada, that talks about giant movie monsters with like an emphasis on Godzilla. But they had a retro review on Black Scorpion. And then after seeing that, something in the universe came together and it just happened to be on TCM the next day. So that was my first time seeing it. So it's probably been a good 6 years since I last saw this movie.
Yeah. My knowledge of it literally just comes from DVD special features of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. They just put in like 4 trailers of stop motion movies.
Which is funny because that was a Harryhausen movie, but this was not.
Yeah, this was O'Brien, but I think Clash of the Titans and Black Scorpion, I think Them was also there, which that's not a stop motion monster movie, but
no, but it probably was more than any other movie the direct inspiration for this one.
Yeah, and it fits the bill, but that's where I found out about it.
Well, this is just a side tangent here, but this is very important. The special features on the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms DVD are phenomenal.
Well, I mean, that version of the DVD.
We'll have to see which one that is. When we get it to you, we'll make sure to recommend you the good one.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll go ahead and just jump in, and let's get to Black Scorpion. So, in the movie Black Scorpion, we have 2 geologists, and they're investigating kind of a volcanic area in Mexico. And in doing so, they come to basically an area that's just been completely deserted. There's supposed to be a village there. All they can find is the body of a cop whose blood has been completely sucked out.
As scorpions tend to do.
Oh, you just spoiled it. Now they know. I guess the movie's called Black Scorpion. And a destroyed police car. And a abandoned baby. So they go to the nearest village, and they bring the baby to the priest there. And in doing so, they run into our leading lady, who is played by Mara Corday. And the 3 of them basically begin to kind of investigate what's going on. And would you know it, deep under the ground, we find a prehistoric species of enormous scorpion who come out by night to terrorize the people of the town. And that's Black Scorpion. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I totally believe you that the scientists are geologists, but I don't think watching it that ever really registered with me. I was just like, science guys here to look at the volcano. Here to look at the stock footage of volcanoes going off.
Well, and the boy does the beginning deliver on volcano stock footage.
Yeah, all the stock footage you could ever want, but not quite as bad as some movies. Robot Monster.
So, I liked this one quite a bit. I think the pacing's pretty decent. A little strange as parts, but I believe it's only 30 minutes into the movie before you first see the Black Scorpions.
I really like this one, but I can see why some people were. I think critical reception was just because it's maybe not as great as the greatest of creature features, but it's also not bad.
No, and I think this one has some merits that are unique to this movie. They should make it part of your, viewing catalog if you like old monster movies. And part of the reason is just the scorpions themselves look really good in this movie.
Yeah, the human drama is pretty, like, who cares? But the scorpions...
It's inoffensive at best, I would say.
Yeah. The romance is a little quick and forced.
And underdeveloped.
Hence the quick. But, I mean, the scorpions are, I mean, they really do all that you would want giant scorpions to do.
They fight each other. At one point, one of the scorpions, or a few of them, fight a 30-foot inchworm that has scorpion claws for some reason. One of them destroys a helicopter. They attack a train. They attack each other. They eat people. If you came to see scorpion action, you're going to be happy.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is you said the cop, he had his blood sucked out. If you look at those giant scorpions, there's no way that they're doing any sort of precision blood sucking.
Especially since we see them just straight up eat people.
Yeah.
And, that's also an element of the movie that never comes back again.
But let's talk a bit about just the scorpions, since they are the stars of the show. The scorpions are, well, they are stop motion for the most part, and they are products of Willis O'Brien.
Willis O'Brien, and not to be discounted, is his partner in this, Pete Peterson. They had worked together before. Willis O'Brien, if you don't know that name, you should. Before Harryhausen even, he was the pioneer of stop motion in these kind of films. He also had a hand in creating probably the most iconic special effects in all of cinema, the effects for King Kong.
Yes, he did King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, and then it's kind of strange because I was looking at his filmography and he doesn't really have a lot of credits.
Oh, and I think some of those are missing. Don't quote me on this. We can double check this, but I want to say he had a role in the special effects for The Lost World.
Yes, he was involved with The Lost World, but
there are also shorts and stuff, and both of them, him and Pete Peterson, would work on some interesting shorts and stuff, but being that they were shorts, I'm not sure sites like IMDb and stuff picked up on that.
And I mean, especially old-time shorts. But, I mean, even with such a small filmography to look over, King Kong is like top 10 movies you must see before you die.
I mean, honestly, I think you could make a good case for it being maybe the greatest film ever.
Yeah, it's in
I'm not saying
that
you have
category.
to believe that or anything, but I'm just saying, like, it's in the running. It deserves to be in the conversation. Pete Peterson had worked with Willis O'Brien before with Mighty Joe Young, and they would work again after this movie in The Giant Behemoth. Or I should believe that's The Giant Behemoth.
Yes, I've never heard anyone pronounce it Behemoth.
That's because that would be wrong.
But didn't O'Brien also work with Harryhausen prior?
He did. In fact, he kind of used to joke around a little bit about training his replacement or training his competition in some ways, because Ray Harryhausen, which that's another name you should know, he was behind the special effects for The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and Clash of the Titans, among many others.
Jason the Argonauts.
Right, those skeletons. He was inspired by Willis O'Brien, and he began to correspond with him, and O'Brien, rather than be stingy, showed him a lot of what he knows about stop motion.
Yeah. Well, some of the effects in this movie, and I think we'll talk a little bit about the budget later, were just done in O'Brien's garage.
Actually, it was Peterson's garage.
Oh, Peterson's garage.
They started in a studio in Mexico City, and as money started to dwindle, they finished up in Peterson's garage in Encino.
But I'm gonna guess that O'Brien and Peterson are the type of people to have their work at home as it comes across as more of a hobby at the time, rather than just like, oh, this is my professional job as the stop motion guy.
The thing is you really had to love it to do it at that time, because people do not understand just how time-consuming stop motion is. It used to be said that what Harryhausen would do is he would just spend hours, long nights, just slightly moving something, taking a picture, take a swig of whiskey, or I don't remember what his drink of choice was.
It would have to. I mean, unless he was really tolerant of it, I think he'd probably have to drink something a little lighter with the sheer amount of pictures required to make anything move.
Well, he also had to be pretty numb to the passage of time. But,
yeah.
In fact, part of the reason movies like Godzilla used a man in a suit is because Toho, even with all of the miniatures and stuff, they couldn't afford stop motion. It was a long, expensive process. And, I imagine that this probably took with the sheer amount of scenes that feature the stop motion scorpions, even with the parts where they reuse footage, it probably still took an exorbitant amount of time.
Yeah, and the scorpion footage, I would say its weakness is also its strength, in that it is a little kind of like low frame rate, but I think that with the way scorpions move in real life, it works with the movie.
Right, actually, yeah, I think in this case, what might be perceived as a weakness of stop motion really makes the scorpions seem like scorpions.
Yeah.
Those odd, deliberate movements are pretty common in the insect and arachnid world. So, and the scorpions, they look great. They move like scorpions, and they find all kinds of creative things for them to do. I mean, despite the fact that this isn't, like a Japanese kaiju movie, we even get some giant monster fights in this one.
Yeah, there's a bigger scorpion than the other scorpions.
I think they call it the granddaddy scorpion.
Yeah, something.
He is the black scorpion.
Yes, and he eats one of the other scorpions at least twice. Now, let's talk about the best part of the scorpions, the face.
Oh, yes. So, this has been divisive for some people. I used to hate it, but now I've decided I love it. Despite the fact that these scorpions they look like lifelike scorpions a lot of the time, they decided that they needed to constantly do this close-up to this giant scorpion face. And you've probably seen it if you've looked at the movie picture. It has big, buggy eyes and giant mandibles, and it is constantly drooling. There's just a constant stream of drool going from its mouth.
Yeah, you'll cut from, stop motion scorpion doing all this cool stuff, and then the most ugly face you have ever seen with like a gallon of some sort of jelly liquid spewing from its mouth.
Yeah, no, I get the feeling that the scorpion drank a bunch of milk before this.
Yeah.
And I mean, on one hand, it is completely ridiculous. It's a drooling scorpion. But on the other hand, we're watching a creature feature. We're not watching Shakespeare here. If they want to have a giant drooling scorpion, go for it. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it is great. I would not want to see that in real life, and so therefore, it is scary and good.
Now, the biggest problem with it, though, is it would be fine if they wanted to cut to it at key times, but they cut to it all of the time, and I'm pretty sure the majority of them are like the same shot.
Yeah, I think they maybe had 5 or 6 different ones, and they just cycled between them, but that would be fine normally, but due to the fact that they constantly use it as a cutaway, it's very excessive.
Right, I could have handled it 3 or 4 times, but look, I didn't count, but it felt like 30.
Yeah.
Well, and that was another weakness of the special effects in this movie a little bit, is the fact that just so much of it got reused. The most egregious example is the giant drooling mock-up. The others you might not even notice as much if you're just watching it for the first time, but there are definitely some repeating scenes here and there of the scorpions.
Yeah, like the final confrontation is pretty cool, but it starts to repeat, like, because they've lured it into this big stadium, and of course they have all these tanks and helicopters trying to kill it, and so it's wrecking everything.
No, there's this really cool part where it like uses its tail to like spike a helicopter into the ground, but then we see it happen again.
Yeah. Once it starts repeating, it's like I think it would have been better just to be a shorter scene with just the one time, or maybe they could have done like a reverse image so it looks like he's doing it to something else, but instead it was so nice you got to see it twice.
Right, though, I mean, it really was really nice. I didn't mind it at all. I will say, though, despite the fact that the giant scorpion, especially the really big one, that's the star of the show, arguably I think the creepiest thing in this movie was this little man-sized trapdoor spider.
Yeah, so, the black scorpions are living underground, and so our main characters, they take a little bucket and go all the way down to underground land, an underground cave system.
And unfortunately for them, we forgot to mention, where would this movie be without an annoying child sidekick?
Yeah, that's
Juanito.
maybe, yeah, Juanito is maybe the only bad part of this movie for me. And it's not even like I hate Juanito, but I really hate annoying child sidekicks.
Now, Juanito will have you begging for Short Round.
Yeah, Short Round is a blessing in comparison
to Juanito.
But Short Round is also, mildly competent.
Right. No, Juanito does nothing but make things harder for our heroes.
So, yeah, they go down into the cave, and Juanito has snuck down there somehow, being unnoticed.
Despite the fact that there's like barely any room in that bucket, somehow he snuck in.
And, of course, he finds the one trapdoor spider thing in the entire cave and gets chased by it. And it's kind of funny. So apart from the scorpions, you have like one or two other monsters, a giant worm with scorpion claws, and then this trapdoor spider that also has scorpion claws.
Yeah, everything has scorpion claws in this universe.
It's just a cave full of scorpion and scorpion adjacent claymation monsters.
Well, you gotta imagine that the gene pool's pretty limited down there.
Yeah, something like that. However, Duke, what makes these extra monsters special?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. So, going back to King Kong, part of the reason we brought it up is in King Kong, there is this missing scene that they took out called the spider pit scene. It is one of the most sought-after pieces of lost cinema. Now, granted, I don't believe that anything was kept of it. The best we can do is speculate. But there is supposedly this scene where they fall into this pit in King Kong, and there's like these horrible like insects in it, and one of them is supposed to be similar to the inchworm and the trapdoor spider that we see here. In fact, a lot of places will just tell you as fact, if you look up trivia about this movie, that these models are the same models from the spider pit scene. There's a lot of debate about that. After looking up lots of things, I'm inclined to think that these are not the same models. A lot of people, including Harryhausen, really question whether Willis O'Brien ever actually kept his models, and that the real ones would have probably been in storage in RKO somewhere, and after 20 years, I mean, it's 24 years between these movies, they probably were not in a state to be used anymore. What I do believe is that it's very likely, based on the shots we have of the sets back then, that Willis O'Brien based their designs off of his original ones for the spider pit scene.
I would say that that's also my opinion here, is that it's probably just original designs remade. The thing is at the time of King Kong and at the time of Black Scorpion, the preservation of pieces of film, like film props, was not super important. To give you an idea, this is, far off into the 70s, but the show Night Gallery, it had all these paintings, and you might wonder, well, what happened to the paintings? Well, they were film props, and then they just painted over them and used them in other things. Like, those paintings are gone. Well, they cared even less back in the 30s and 50s. So even if that they were in storage, they were definitely not properly taken care of. I mean, it's hard to keep latex around, and I'm not exactly sure what they made the little stop motion guys out of, but I'm going to guess it was probably some sort of like plastic or rubber or something like that, and it probably was starting to rot, even if it did still exist by that time.
Yeah, and you have to think from their point of view, too. Who's going to want models from a movie, from a scene that didn't even go in the movie?
Yeah.
Like, they could not think. But now the spider pit scene is one of those things that's almost more legend than fact. There's so many different stories out there. The best I can figure is, I think a lot of people at the time are under the opinion that it was like too gruesome to be shown. I think now, from what I've heard, that it was probably cut for pacing. But the cool thing is, though, is that this movie, Black Scorpion, some of these cavern scenes are probably the closest thing you'll ever see to the actual spider pit scene that exists.
The real tragedy of it is that Juanito is a part of it.
That one, well, that spider, I will say, the special effects in that scene were really good for making the spider really look like it was chasing Juanito. Like I said, this is probably the creepiest part of the movie. I wouldn't want that thing after me.
Except I will say I'm pretty sure that the trapdoor spider thing was like making jungle bird noises. I'm not an expert on stock sound effects, but I'm pretty sure I've heard those noises before in jungle related films. Just like how the black scorpions make the ant noise from them.
No, and it's not just something that sounds like this is the same studio that produced them. It's literally the same sound effect.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the sound effect for them is something involving a bird store, because you can definitely, if you listen closely, you can hear birds.
Well, Bones, you had a tarantula in the past. Did it ever make any jungle bird sounds at you?
No, it made zero bird noises at all.
Huh, I guess there's no truth in filmmaking anymore.
Now, I'm not an expert in scorpions, so I guess tarantulas are their genetic neighbors, being both arachnids, but some bugs can make, they're called stridulations, I believe.
Yes.
And it mostly just sounds like hissing. So I think it might be possible that a black scorpion could maybe hiss, but definitely not sound like a peacock in the jungle.
Well, most scorpions aren't giant either, so. Now, we said that stop motion was used for the scorpions. There is one exception. You see, this movie, as we alluded to earlier, started to run out of money towards the end of its production, and I think a lot of these things might have even been filmed in order. So we get some scenes when the big scorpion is going through Mexico City, where it's not stop motion. It's actually, I believe, what's called a traveling mat. And Bones, you know more about this stuff than I do. Would you let us know how that's done and what that looked like?
It's a little weird that it's called a traveling mat, and it is still sort of stop motion. Pretty much what the scene looks like is you've got this giant it looks like someone animated, like drew on the film a giant black scorpion running around. What a traveling mat is if you've ever heard of chroma key, which is used in television, it's like, all right, we've filmed these people in front of a green screen, and then we've inserted them into the film. So,
except that this time it would have been very manual.
Yeah, so they say it's a traveling mat, but I'm curious as to if they just took scorpion footage and then cut out the scorpion, and so it was just the black of the missing piece and they put that over, or what. But it's sort of a weird effect having this instead of the scorpion running around the city, just a giant black outline of a scorpion running throughout the city.
Well, and it reminds me of, because for the most part, it doesn't look as bad as I've seen similar techniques in other films, but it is a little translucent. I wonder, is this similar to what, like, Burt I. Gordon did in some of his movies?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I can't remember if he was directly involved in Attack the 50-Foot Woman or not, but you notice there's parts of the film where she's practically a ghost.
Yeah, no, that he superimposed her over the, he took giant woman footage and superimposed that over footage lacking a giant woman.
And the results were interesting, to say the least.
But yeah, back in the day, that process would typically leave the footage a little see-through sometimes if it wasn't done super well.
And it rarely was.
Yeah, well, I doubt that they were even using green screens at the time. They were probably filming against, like, black backgrounds and cutting that out. But I can see where there would be difficulties filming against a black background and then trying to cut that out when your footage is also black and white.
Well, and I imagine since we're running out of money at this point, that we're probably also running out of time since, time is money when you're making a movie.
Yeah.
Even though Perry thinks it happens in 8 days.
Yeah. If you've been paying attention.
Yeah, see our last episode for details. I think that about covers the special effects. You want to talk about the cast?
Yeah, so I've only have the 3 main actors down. There are more, and some of them have done stuff, but there's really no important characters other than our big 3.
Right. You could argue that Juanito is kind of important, and there was some other good actors in the film even, but their parts were just very small. Between the Scorpions and our main cast, there's not really that much room for anything else.
But you've got your leading man, Hank, who's played by Richard Denning, who is in Creature from the Black Lagoon. He's
personal favorite of mine.
He's like the rival scientist, the not nice one in that movie, if I'm remembering correctly. He's also in Creature with the Atom Brain, so...
Have not seen, but can't imagine that could possibly be bad.
But he was a very active actor. Lots of creature features.
Right, well, and for you Vincent Price fans, he also was in the movie Twice Told Tales with Vincent Price and I believe Peter Lorre.
Yes. Next is our character Teresa, played by Mara Corday, who is in, well, Duke, you want to say?
Who's in probably what is the greatest movie of all time, The Giant Claw.
Yes, we talked about her on that episode, but to go over her again, she was in The Giant Claw, and she was in Tarantula.
She was in a lot more than that, but if you're listening to this podcast, those might be 2 of your favorite movies.
And then she was in the Dirty Harry movies, playing different bit parts. So.
Well, and I think we briefly mentioned this, but that was because when she was in Tarantula, who was uncredited in that movie with her?
Yeah, Clint Eastwood was a fighter pilot in that movie, so they became friends. Then our last actor of note, the character Arturo, is played by Carlos Rivas.
I believe it's Rivas.
Rivas, we'll say that. He was in The King and I, but he wasn't Yul Brynner.
No, he was also in another personal favorite of the Duke's, True Grit.
Yeah, and Topaz, but those were both real small roles.
No, and I wonder if some of these, if he was in more Mexican features. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, outside of the 2 actors we just made, most of these actors were Mexican actors. This was filmed mostly in Mexico.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess the last part of the cast, and I don't think he's seen, but Bob Johnson. He is your narrator, your police dispatcher, and your radio newscaster in this movie.
He does it all. And within the first 10 seconds of the movie and then never again.
But he is notable because if you've ever watched the television show Mission Impossible, he is the voice that opens, like, if you haven't seen the show, the guy, he gets a tape and it says, "We have a mission for you, yada, yada, yada.
If you choose to accept it, this thing will self-destruct."
The guy telling you if you choose to accept is Bob Johnson.
Well, actually, I have one more actor I want to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Juanito.
I don't want to talk about Juanito.
Well, not only is he he kind of plays the same role in 2 other movies. He was played by Mario Navarro, which is really funny because if you go onto Google and you type in Black Scorpion, you know how Google will show you who the cast is and they'll add pictures to it? Well, they obviously were just looking for anybody named Mario Navarro because if you look, you'll see an MMA fighter in the place of Juanito. But he was in The Beast from Hollow Mountain.
I think I've seen that I have no clue what that is about. What is that?
I want to say it's a giant dinosaur movie, but it's one that we need to watch. He was also in, we have another Yul Brynner connection. He was in The Magnificent Seven.
Oh, I now know who Juanito is. It is suddenly clicked. I'm going to guess he's the one who is, I think it's Bronson's character. Yeah.
Yep.
He's a little less annoying in that movie.
No. And what's funny, too, is the director. The director was Edward Ludwig. And what's funny about him is just, so I don't think you guys realized back in the day what a movie machine Hollywood was. I mean, right now we have like, there's years between movies and series and stuff, but I mean, they were cranking out movies like nobody's business. And because of that, if you look at Edward Ludwig, not only does he have a huge filmography, but it's all over the place. He's not like, a horror director or a Western director. In fact, let me just read you just a short version of the filmography. So he was responsible for directing Old Man Rhythm, a musical, The Fighting Seabees, a John Wayne war movie, and the only one from this list other than the movie we're talking about now that I've seen, The Gun Hawk, and an old version of The Swiss Family Robinson.
I didn't know that there was an old version of Swiss Family Robinson.
There sure is. And Edward Ludwig directed it. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting that you have like a Western, a horror movie, a musical, all just the same guy.
He's a workhorse director, which you don't really see a lot of now. I feel like now we're at a point where people like cinematographers, directors, and writers are just as big as the stars in the movies. But yeah, back in the day, it was you worked. This was a job. So as soon as you finished one movie that you filmed in 8 days, you then go on to film the next movie in 8 days. And you know what? Some of these movies probably were actually shot in 8 days.
I wouldn't be surprised. Not this one, though. I doubt you could do like 20 minutes. I doubt you could do 10 minutes of scorpion footage in 8 days.
Probably not. Well, this is a giant bug monster movie. Compared to the other giant bug monster movies, how does this one do? I wouldn't say it's as good as them. I think them is probably the king, but maybe compared to, the Deadly Mantis or Tarantula, where does it stand?
I would say it's on the upper end for sure, and I think what puts it on the upper end is its use of the stop motion effects.
Yeah.
A lot of those movies, despite being really fun, big fan of these, most of them just do not look as good, especially like, as much as well known as Burt I. Gordon is, a lot of them used like superimposed footage. They just did not look as good.
Yeah, no, the real life bug footage crudely put in does not look as good as the stop motion does.
No, or even them's puppets, which despite maybe
don't talk crap about them's puppets.
No, I was saying the superimposed stuff doesn't look as good as them's puppets.
Sorry. I jumped the gun to attack you.
He's very protective of them.
Yes, I love them.
Well, and here's a good point of reference. If you like them, watch this movie. It's made by the same studio. A year later, even reuse some of the effects. You got to think that they were thinking very much about them when this movie was made.
Yeah.
And the opening's even somewhat similar.
The opening is almost exactly the same, except instead of the cops finding the dead body, it is the people. So civilians find the cops' dead body.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I have much else to say about Black Scorpion.
No, I think we've said it. Like I said, this is a recommend. If you like giant bug flicks, if you like them, this is a movie you're going to like. If those things don't appeal to you, I'm not sure how you found this episode, but you can skip it. It won't change your life, but it will kill an hour and a half in a very pleasant way.
Yes. Well, I guess I should tell you what we're watching next time. We are going to be watching maybe the greatest movie ever made, the Nicolas Cage classic Vampire's Kiss.
No! It's my turn to groan this time.
You're groaning, but you don't even know. You don't even know.
I guess we'll see. This is probably the receipt for Robot Monster.
No, this is the greatest movie ever made. And you're going to love it. And the audience is going to love it too. So they should watch it and reconvene with us.
Well, and that means that, you know what it's time to do now?
Plug.
So one, sorry that this episode's a little late, folks. We were off on a little vacation, but we're back now. While we were on that vacation, we see that Roman is still getting work these days. We found ourselves at an Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie concert, and would you know it, Roman was on the stage right there. So
him and the Phantom Creeps robot.
A movie we'll have to eventually talk about, but, despite that you weren't very pleased with Roman's physique in the movie. He lost some weight.
Yeah, no,
gained
he
some
slimmed
height.
down.
So anyway, just thank you guys who are listening. Like I said, we've said this before, podcasting is an uphill battle when you're first getting started, but we're having a blast doing this, and if you enjoy this, leave a review or a like or wherever you're listening to us. And if you're looking for where else you can hear us, we're kind of everywhere right now. We're on YouTube, CastBox, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey. I don't know if anybody has discovered us on Odyssey, but we are there.
It's an archive. No one needs to discover us.
Well, when YouTube decides that, they don't want us anymore for some reason that they won't probably explain to us, we'll be on Odyssey.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
No, other than, again, apologies for having been so late to put up a new episode.
I know. We went out for milk with you guys, but we did come back.
We did come back, and, well, we're leaving again, but hopefully the milk will not have spoiled this time.
So anyway, thanks for listening, and keep it cool.
Goodbye.